Welcome, everyone. Today is a very special opportunity to talk to someone about a topic in our special issues UCLA class that is generate a lot of conversation, a lot of thought, and frankly, a lot of controversy. So today I have with me Cyndy Montgomery. Hi, Cyndy. Glad to have you.
Hi, glad to
And
be here.
And Cyndy is from the Washington, D.C., Maryland area, and she has quite an extensive background, and she's very interested and engaged in advocacy for racial diversity and equity. So, did I say that right, Cyndy?
Yes, you did.
All right. So, tell us a little bit about you, your background, your experience, what was your educational pathway like?
Absolutely. So, my parents were military. I was a Navy brat, but we didn't move around. My parents actually made the decision not to move me and then subsequently my sister. My mom is a Jamaican immigrant. And so, my parents actually, they both ended up in the military kind of really before college. And while they did get their degree eventually, my mom after the military, my dad online while he was still in service. They didn't really traditionally go to college and do that high school to college pathway. But growing up in my home, education was so important. West Indies families, there's a big priority on education as a pathway for upward mobility. And so actually growing up, we were quite low income when I was younger. I qualified for Head Start. And my mom was really involved in my education. And I ended up, because of the work that she did at home, I ended up being able to skip kindergarten and then subsequently be in advanced classes. My mom really advocated for me growing up. She always told me and taught me that you are your best advocate. And especially for students of color, you sometimes have to advocate just to get the same opportunities that you would have otherwise. And so she always enabled me and told me the importance of speaking up for myself. When it came to, kind of the college application process, so I did have a lot of questions. I knew I was one of those students who knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. When I was about 8, I asked my parents if they would adopt an older sibling, mostly because I was tired of being the only one. And I didn't want a younger sibling. I wanted someone to go through life before me and then tell me everything that I should do and not do. And they said no. They had these Wednesdays child commercials that or kind of programs that were on TV at the time where they would show all the children who were free for adoption from the system, children who had had their parental rights already terminated. And so they were clear, as we call it, for adoption. And in my head, this made perfect sense. These were children who needed homes. I needed a sibling. And my parents really just were like, it's really complicated and it's not something that we're interested in doing right now. I'm sure they didn't feel the need to explain too much to an 8-year-old. But it ended up sparking a really large interest in the foster care system for me and these other students like me, their kind of trajectory in life that was coupled with the fact that my church did Wednesday night Bible studies. And we were in like a Lincoln Park community, which is a slightly lower income community, historically African American community. And a lot of the students from that community would come because the church did free dinners, but they were on a different path educationally. We went to the same schools, we had the same teachers. A lot of times in this country, we talk about the education gap and we talk about teachers and schools and funding, but what we don't talk about is the support gap at home and the information dissemination gap, and the relational gap. And so that was really my first eye open into that, because we had the same teachers but we were on different paths. So I decided I wanted to go into child advocacy to bridge the education equity gap from a custody lens and a family lens. When I applied to college, I really didn't know where I wanted to go. I basically applied based off of TV shows, based off of Gilmore Girls, but I just thought Connecticut was the perfect place for me. And New Jersey happened to be next to Connecticut. I'm very fortunate that I had teachers that really took me under their wing, that really guided me, that really made sure my essays were perfect. And I ended up being one of the first students from my high school to go to an Ivy League. I went to Princeton for undergrad. And that entire process, the fact that also Princeton was the most affordable school for my family at the time, really illuminated some of the misinformation about the college application process, about financial aid, and also about undermatching, because so many people told me, oh, you could never get in, you don't have 4.0, they only take rich kids, we don't come from the right kind of school. So many reasons why I shouldn't apply. And those were all incorrect. And there are so many children who don't apply to schools that could open really doors for them because of misinformation. All throughout college, I was in Theta. Our national philanthropy is quite important, special advocates. So I got to work in those child custody matters. I had phenomenal pre-law advising that really helped me. And I was during that whole time helping students from my church, from my dance studios, from my school, kind of with the college application process, with their essays, with financial aid advocacy. And so I was able to matriculate from Princeton to Harvard Law School. And then that fall, Princeton ended up losing their pre-law advising. And so there was no pre-law advising for a couple of years, not truly. And so I, once again, kind of stepped in and helped a lot of the Black and Brown students, my classmates, through the process, because we're the least likely to have guidance in the law school application process. And so while I was in law school, I was on the child advocacy path, but I also started to take stock of just the fact that I had so many doors open to me almost by happenstance that really changed my trajectory and changed my path. Right here I was at Harvard Law School, which might not have been possible if not for Princeton, which might not have been possible if not for my teachers. And I really started to see how one door becomes a domino effect. So as I graduated law school, I did click for judge and family rotation, but I also signed up for UCI, the certificate program in independent educational consulting. I joined the Potomac and Chesapeake Association for College Admission Counseling and IECA. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to blend my legal pathway with consulting. I ended up going to a family law litigation firm and doing private child custody and divorce work, but ultimately felt like God was really calling me to make more of a commitment to the students that I was working with, make more of a commitment to the young adults and full adults that are trying to go on the law school application path. So I pivoted to consulting full-time in April 2020. I have not looked back. I absolutely love what I do. I love the impact that I'm able to make, but more importantly, I love that I'm helping people break down generational barriers to higher education and really start to create generational wealth, and also just mindset shifts in their future and their legacy.
Wow, I didn't realize you had just really started last year and during the pandemic, no less. That is quite a challenge.
So I started consulting in 2012, but part-time. So even I think I'm crazy looking back at it, but I had a full caseload of at least 24 people while I was at the firm, a little less than 20 while I was clerking. So I had been doing it for some time, just truly, working. And I think for me, both my parents worked two jobs, and I helped pay for a lot of my sister's educational expenses, tutoring and summer programs. So it was not anything new to have two jobs, or basically two full-time jobs. It was just what we did.
So looking back, and you've already explained a little bit about this, as you think about your background, what you went through, and how you want to be that role model and help other students, how does that contribute to your passion for diversity and equity? As you said, students of color are not, they're less likely to get that kind of advising. That's an issue. What else do you see, how from your experience, or what your goals are to contribute to diversity and equity?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is at the center of everything that I do. I'm primarily a law school admission consultant. And one of the reasons why I kind of made that shift from doing both equally to focusing more on law school is just the influx of people. Last year I launched my YouTube channel and I started having a slightly bigger social presence. And we don't think about some things in 2021 because we're like, oh, we're a little bit past that. But the number of Black and Latino women that would come to me and tell me that they'd never met a Black attorney before, that my ad is the first time that they had seen a Black lawyer who they felt like they could speak to, and really digging into the statistics that only 2% of lawyers in this country are Black women, right? Only 5% are Black in general. And the shutout rate for Black applicants, 1 in 2 Black applicants don't get into any law school that they apply to. um, those statistics really anger me. There's so much from like the institutional barriers I think are so clear, and they're clear on the high school to college side as well. When we look about the inequity in standardized tests, when we look about just really information dissemination, and I think when I started to see the fact that, okay, I can help build communities. So I don't just advise students, but I bridge students together. And I started praying for my students and having prayer circles for those that are interested in it, realizing that for some people, this is literally like generational life changing. And I think also for myself, when I started realizing how much it was going to change my family trajectory, my children and their children, the path that I went on. And so for me, yes, I consult students, but it's also really important that I provide several different types of options, right? There's one-on-one, there's group, there's digital products, there's online courses, there's e-guides, there's free, I do free like live Q&As twice a month in my Facebook group, because I think that so much information shouldn't be behind a paywall. And that is really at the heart of what I'm trying to do, trying to hopefully like have a larger platform so that I can give what should be honestly basic advice that everyone has about the college and the law school process. Basic information about where to find scholarships, basic information about, just what a balanced list looks like. I think that that's so important. And I think also when I work with my students on college counseling, fit is so crucial when we talk about the harmful effects that some predominantly white institutions have. Some of my Black friends, they talk about the PTSD they had from their college experience. I feel like that is unacceptable. And so we need to do more to allow people to get into these institutions, to feel safe and welcome there, to thrive, and to become a self-actualized person.
So what do you think higher education should be striving for, and looking at all these different things and all the challenges, all the barriers that you see students having to endure to get there? Should higher education be striving for equality or equity? And there's a lot, there's lawsuits about this, and California, that's a big issue here too. So what are your thoughts on that, Cyndy?
Definitely equity. I don't see how equality would go about changing anything. And I think equality is a misnomer, right? Like if you say, okay, in higher education, we're going to have equality, are they going to have equal things in high school and equal things in middle school and equal things in elementary school? Because it's not equality if one group of people has 27 obstacles and one group of people has 2. That's not equality, right? If you serve them equally, you're really doing them a disservice. So I think that while equality sounds nice, it is a complete disregard of the reality of the situation that we're living in. We're not living in a system that from its very beginning, from the formation of this country, and when we talk about, slavery, we talk about sharecropping, we talk about Jim Crow, like there has never been a time when there was equality. So I feel like equity is the only answer to generations upon generations upon generations of policies deliberately put in place to keep certain groups down, right? And so for me, it's not enough until there aren't any underrepresented minorities. We look at the population of this country, African Americans are 13% of the population.
Right.
And like across the board, almost most schools are, at least the top schools are about maybe 7%. Per most of them, it's like 4%, right? You look at the UC system, it's been 4% for the past almost 20 years. What is that? Right? There are plenty of talented Black students, and not just Black students, Latinx students, Native American students, right? Like this notion that there can only be 4% of students that are that qualified is just wrong, right? It means that you're not doing enough to recruit, you're not doing enough to retain.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because this year, because of the pandemic, the statistics for the University of California system just came out, and they've actually seen a much greater admissions rate of students of color. And much of it has to do with the waiver of the test, the standardized testing, because those students are then able to, their strengths and what they have to contribute to the campus is shining forth a little bit. And yeah, I think sometimes, a lot of times, college universities, and we, even us as educators, we like to talk this about equity, but the proof is in those statistics and admissions, as you said. So so what role does racial identity play in the process for in access to college? What does it play, and what should it play?
Right. So when we talk about access to college, I think the role of racial identity is kind of threefold, right? There's, like I've mentioned, information dissemination, just literal access to information. But then there's also the implicit bias that students encounter on both sides of the desk, right? And then there's also internalized racism. So when we talk about internalized racism, I mean the fact that some students, by the time they get to the college application process, have believed the lie that they are less than, that they aren't worthy, that they can't achieve, that they can't go to certain schools, that they'll never be able to pay for it, that it's like an unachievable thing, literally a pipe dream, right? And so I think when you still have students who at their core don't believe that they are as good as their peers because of the messages that they've received from media, from their teachers, from their circumstances, that translates to where they reach, that translates to just like their goals. There's studies that show that high achieving low income students are so likely to undermatch, right? They're so likely to not apply to schools where they could get free ride, where they could really thrive because of misconceptions and misinformation. And I think that when you really look at that population of high achieving lower income students, and you look to see the fact that they aren't achieving their academic goals, that's really where you have the problem. And so some of that is internalized racism, but some of that comes from counselors. And our own, if we're going to be honest, our own kind of biases about what this student can achieve, where this student will be comfortable. Maybe they'll only be comfortable at an HBCU, but for some students, an HBCU is a fantastic option, right? And I think there's also that issue on the other side of counselors thinking that HBCUs aren't quality institutions.
Right.
But every student is not the same, and I think you can't paint a wide brush. So counselors really taking the time to maybe look beyond, okay, well, maybe her grades aren't this, but she has all these things, and I know that the school really values those softer factors in the application. Then there's admissions readers from the other side, right? We don't often talk about the fact that they're reading with their own biases. Sometimes we don't have enough admission readers of color, enough admission readers who understand the landscape that some of these students are coming from. You look at the teacher recommendations and the counselor recommendations and the care that some people play. So there's a lot of behind the scenes factors that just because of the color of your skin and your background, you might have a higher burden, even though people want to say it's the same process and you have the same chances. The truth is that you have to overcome, like every single person in the process has to have checked their own biases at the door in order for that student to achieve.
So now a lot of students are coming from multiracial backgrounds. And for so many years, they couldn't even check that box, right? It was like, which identity do I pick? And now they're at least being able to do that. I work with a lot of students who come from, multiracial backgrounds. And do you see that having an impact? Is that going to, how is that going to influence this process? Is it like, if I'm a student of color, which identity do I go with? And is it better for me to go with my, Black identity or my brown identity? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated question. It's a very nuanced question. I want us to be at a place where students can authentically check all the boxes that they really resonate with. And feel comfortable that, yes, this college wants me because of me, and it doesn't matter if I checked one box or two boxes. I'm the same applicant, and this college is gonna, still want me. I think the reality is that that's not the case. I've worked with some students who could, because of where their ethnic background falls in, can kind of equally check an Asian box or a Pacific Islander Hispanic box. And I'm not going to lie to you, right? There are some choices that are a little bit more advantageous to that student than others, if we're being real, and that's a problem, right? So I really do believe in equity in higher education, and I also believe in transparency, and the racial identity formation that we're causing these students to go through, because it's not just the process, right? They're taking that with them into their beginnings of their adult life. And so when I have Asian students that I work with who say, well, maybe I should quit piano because it's too Asian, maybe I should do something else, colleges don't want to see that I play violin, that's heartbreaking, right? If you have a kid that loves the piano, why not? But we create this system where on both ends, you've got Asians as model minorities who are literally afraid to do things that they like to do, or they're pushing themselves to do things that they don't want to do, so it can seem less Asian and maybe get in. And then you've got, on the other hand, you've got Black students who are trying their darndest to overcome all of these obstacles and be these superheroes. And we have these great access programs like QuestBridge and Posse, and those are fantastic. But sometimes it convinces students that it's not okay to be like, hey, you're low income, you're doing a lot, you're achieving a lot, and you have average grades, and I'm really proud of you for that. It's like, no, you actually also have to be the president of 3 organizations and a 4.0. And why aren't you working 3 jobs and taking care of your kid and also taking 5 AP classes, right? Like, you can do things and then we'll give you a full ride. So I think that when we talk about what colleges can do, and we talk about those boxes that students are checking, I think you need to understand that it's not just a like name address question. It's a little bit deeper than that. There, as long as it is a little bit more nuanced on the college end, it's going to be a little bit more nuanced on the student's end.
So what do you advise us as advisors or counselors? What can we do to help students of color as they go through this process?
Absolutely. So I think one of the best things that you can do is help students see that they have options and that they're not a monolith. I think that the more we can dismantle this idea that, all Black students from this area are the same, or all, Asian students like this are the same, right? The more that we can see them for the individuality that they have, the more they are going to be able to see themselves as a worthy individual and not just having the same qualities as the stereotype or the wide brush that they're being painted with. In terms of their college choices, that means really listening to them. So I help build my students list, and this is going to sound controversial, but I help build it first without race and then with race. Why? Because I think that it's important that I'm capturing everything that the student could be interested in. I do my list building a little bit different. I let my students start with a list of about 30 schools. Mm-hmm. And then we whittle down from there, because I think it's really important that we're not shutting off any avenues. And we can add, right? As we start to whittle, then I might do another layer. Okay, these are the schools that I know are fantastic for empowering Black students or empowering Latinx students. These are the schools that I know have really great community. Let me see if we can add any of these to the list, right? So, but that first lens, I don't want them to feel immediately like their choices are limited because of the color of their skin. And I have them do that demographic search themselves, right? I want you to pull up the demographic data, and then I want you to talk to students. I think having students talk to literally, like, almost every college at this point has a multicultural ethnic group, student group. They have emails. They usually have a membership chair or a vice president, right? Have them talk to someone their own age in that group, because they'll tell them. And then have them look at newspapers, like the student-run newspaper, to see what incidents have been on campus, and what is the administration response to things. Look at social media for the schools. Just because a school has 3% Black students doesn't mean that every Black student there hates it. Just because a school has 20% Black students doesn't mean that it's a welcoming environment. The percentage doesn't only dictate, what the experience is going to be. You really need to do some digging. So yeah, it's a little bit more work. I'm actually really excited because I, along with a couple other independent educational consultants, founded College Equity First, which is a nonprofit that is releasing a college equity index. And so it ranks about 108 of the top schools that on measures for the atmosphere, the climate, the return on investment, the graduation rates, the financial investment, right, for students of color. And so that is a really great resource. We did it to hopefully help push universities to be more equitable, see what their peer institutions are doing, which ones are better, which ones are not, and also highlight the schools, including the HBCUs, that are doing a fantastic job and have that great return on investment. But I would say for counselors, just really taking the time to look beyond the easy verifiable numbers, look beyond the percentage, look beyond the spiel that the admissions officer is going to give you about how diverse they are, and really see. I love to ask people, what is your institution's response to racial incidents? Not do you have any, because you have some, right? But what is your response to it? How do students bring concerns to administration about racial climate and racial injustice? And those are very telling answers and questions.
Yeah, if they're sweeping it under the rug, or if they're empowering students, or how they're reacting. Right. Well, that's fantastic. I hadn't heard about your nonprofit. Is that index available now? I know that's going to be one of the first questions people are going to ask, Cyndy. So, is it available yet?
It is launching this week. So I feel comfortable sharing. So by the time you watch this recording, it will be available. And yes, I think it's, it's sortable. All of the colleges are indexed using 19 different qualities and features. Like I said, we took graduation rates, percentage of Black students, percentage of faculty, and compared that to non-underrepresented minorities, the alumni surveys on spiritual development, on friendship, on campus climate, some qualitative data from the Black Ad Instagrams. We really did a deep dive on and trying to get a sense of what is it like on these campuses for Black students. And you really can, like, if you do the research, you really can find where some schools have repeated incidents and administration repeatedly does nothing, or students feel like they don't have an avenue. And so I think those kinds of things, are a little bit more telling for me about the experience. And then really also, what does the Black community look like? How many? Or Latinx or Asian, right? Like, how many student groups are there? Do they meet regularly? Is there a mentorship system? Because if that community is strong, that can really enhance a student's experience, even if it's a small percentage at the school.
Right. Yeah, to find that support community. So if somebody needs to ask you a question or wants to reach you, how do they reach you?
Absolutely. So I can always be reached at Sydney at smontgomeryconsulting.com. You can follow me on Instagram at smontgomeryconsulting, or my YouTube channel, which is S Montgomery Admissions Consulting. I love talking to people about equity and diversity. If you also are interested in having me come speak, I have a speaking kit that I can send to you as well. And I can talk about different areas of equity and diversity as it pertains to what you should be looking at as an admissions professional, but also how your students can be better empowered to step confidently into their purpose and not let some of the negative mistruths about them stop them from walking into their purpose.
That is wonderful, Cyndy. Thank you so much. I know it's so exciting, all the things that you're doing, and you're teaching us too. You're teaching me, you're teaching all of us. So we appreciate it. And, just keep sounding, using your bullhorn and helping us all, because we all want to, contribute in whatever way we can. So thank you for your time today. And
absolutely.
I look forward to speaking with you, and please send me the link. I'll post the link to your equity index, and we'll get that out too. Okay?
Yes, I absolutely will. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you.